questions, so feel free to send them directly through the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. Yeah, we'll try and go over all the questions as we progress in the conversation, or we've got a dedicated Q&A session at the end. I didn't introduce myself, so I'm Julian. I'm your host for today. I'm the project manager here at Funding Box, which is a European deep tech accelerator and community builder. We're partners in Photon Hub Europe and one of 53 partners. So it's a big project funded by the European Commission, which seeks to boost the competitiveness and uptake of photonic technologies across Europe. So if your company is innovating in this space of photonics and you're interested in grant funding, in technical support, business and investment readiness coaching, training, or access to advanced research centers focused on the technologies you can now see on your slide, feel free to reach out to us. So you can go on photonhub.eu, where the website, again, you've got the link bottom right of the screen, and you can fill in a short application form so that the most appropriate person on the team can get back to you on this. Speaking of signups, startups, investors, academics, researchers, technology centers can all come together and promote their organization on the community, which I already referred to a few times. So this is the Photon Hub community, and again, my colleagues will send a link in the chat now. So what's on the menu today? As the name suggests, Photonpreneurs is a series designed to share fundraising tips and best practices. So that's what we're all here for, especially those companies exploring, designing, launching businesses in the science of technology of light, which is photonics. So our next episode will be in 2022, in January, on the January 26th, with Almudena, the managing partner of an early stage VC venture capital fund called Be Able Capital, which has a strong focus on deep tech and, more importantly, on photonics. So the link will be in the chat now, and we'll post it again at the end of the webinar. So the webinar today is actually part of Photonic Finland's month of photonics. It's also obviously part of Photon Hub Europe. The organization Photonic Finland is one of the key members in Photon Hub Europe. And I want to thank Anna for making this happen because she was the one to arrange this call with Antti. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Antti Sunnari, founder and CEO of Dispelix OI, who launched his photonic startup in 2015 and raised more than 52 million euros, which is pretty incredible, in 3 rounds, seed A and B. So we'll go back over that very shortly. The aim for him with Dispelix is to contend in this booming AR smart glasses market. So yes, we'll go over the more details of his funding journey, but before I go and talk more, Antti, welcome.
Well, Julie, great to be here.
So to get things started, the same way we usually do it, we've done it up to now, is to ask you to share a bit about your background, your entrepreneurial journey to date, transition from the world of research to entrepreneurship. So over to you.
Okay, so yeah, you heard the name already. I'm on a photonics area, but I'm a little bit oddball. My background is chemistry, and I did a master in the University of Oulu, and the next step was that I went to VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland, to work on a different kind of projects, and I did a lot of chemistry stuff, but then in 2011, I started to do some replication of nanostructures, basically these diffractive structures, and later on we spin out the company from that with the many different parts inside. But that's maybe my background. A little bit more. I'm living here in Finland. I have a wife and 2 kids. And my hobbies are everything related to engines and going fast.
Okay, so I guess how did it all come together? Like what sparked the idea of launching your business and just jumping to a new uncharted territory?
Yeah, so basically it was I was doing really research topic things. I was doing an transfer foil for diffractive elements that you can, for instance, transfer in your fingernail and have a nice rainbow patterns there. And throughout the basic accident, we actually find out the phenomenon that we can cancel out transmissive diffraction, but we still had the reflective part of the diffraction. And that was like, hey, this is nice. What we're gonna do with it? And we didn't figure out anything. We made just patent application about it, and then a little bit later we came up with these Nokia papers on a diffractive waveguides, and they said that, hey, it stated in the papers that one big issue on these diffractive waveguides is actually so-called rainbow, which is caused by the transmissive light diffraction. And we were like, hey, we have a solution that one, and let's dig deeper. And once I get into that, 2012 time, it was like, hey, if we could make a displays on everyday classes, like that can be used to everything. Like back in those days, it was more thinking on the guidance and those. It was time before the mixed reality and everything. So that kick off the basic idea. Hey, we have a nice technology, something new, and now we find an application where it actually solves a problem. And then we got some money from VTT, and later on the government and on the Business Finland to do actually a demonstrator of the technology.
Okay. And so did you do this by yourself? Were you surrounded by your co-founders right from the start? Do you want to tell us a bit more about how the project actually came together on the logistical side of things?
Yeah, so of course, I'm chemist, so I was preparing the samples, doing those, and the real brains behind was my co-founder, Juuso Olkkonen, now our CTO. So we went through on once the accident went through, and I went through on everyone, and I got just a lousy explanation, and then one guy said to me that, hey, there is a brilliant guy in VTT different site, Espoo site, that hey, he could know, and there we connected with Juuso on this and this problem, and Juuso was the only one understanding what happened there. The destructive interferences and those things, and then we actually did the 5 years in a VTT mostly together, developing the technology. Of course, we had a help on some projector and those end, but we were like the pretty much on the technical side. Then later on, we had a Riku Rikkola helping us on the business side and business model and those kind of thinkings in VTT prior the spin out.
Okay, and so if you looked at the ups and downs of launching a business, what would you say was the most challenging element?
Well, the most challenging is, of course, to come up the name for the company.
Yeah.
No, just that takes time, but of course it's I don't know, leap in faith. You have to say that it's good that you don't know everything that is ahead on what you need to do. Otherwise, you could just stay in as a researcher in a nice government job, and but it was the decision was huge to make that, hey, I'm leaving out this position in VTT as a researcher, and I'm gonna found a company that's a big decision. And then it comes, of course, the biggest decision you make in the early on what the company will be doing. So we were thinking a lot that should we make our own end products, or should we only focus on the component? And if the component, what is our part? Do we do on the design? Do we manufacture? Are we fabless? What kind of R&D we will be having an internal? And we were, and to be honest, we were a little bit afraid to go component only business. Like it's a boring. You are doing component. It's lots cooler if you make products. But then we came across with the third founder of Dispelix, Professor Jyrki Saarinen, and he was earlier the founder of Heptagon. And throughout the Jyrki's comments and experience on building a company from 1 people to 1,000 people, we decided that, hey, it's better to focus on what we know and where we are good, and to focus only on the waveguide, only on the component, and not to compete with the big name companies, and rather have them as our customer.
Okay. And I guess where in that thought process did you actually decide that external capital was necessary? Was it really early on or progressively?
Yeah, it was really early on. So these things are not made in a garage. So you need to be in a clean room. You need to be able to pay on use of those tools, and you need a lot of brain power. You need to hire a lot of people. You need to use supercomputers and everything. So from the beginning, it was that we need venture funding. That's for sure. And we started raising about mid 2015, like getting in touch of the investors and everyone, and then we found the company actually. I think it was in October 2015. We were still working at the VTT, and then we closed the seed round on April 2016, and then we actually spin out from VTT, turn our badges back there. And should I go a little bit about the seed round funding?
Yeah,
or
I was going to jump in and actually say, can you tell us a bit more about the seed round, how it came together, how you reached out to investors in the first place? Was it through VTT? Was it through your own contacts? All that kind of practical information that I think the audience is interested in. Yeah,
of course. It's a big league, and your learning curve will be very, very deep on that one. So learning a lot of things. So back in that time, there was I know in a VTT they had like the investment arm, VTT Ventures, and throughout the VTT Ventures we got the intros to go and pitch to the investors. We started. Our strategy was that, hey, let's go to the smaller ones, or those investors that we don't even want to have an investor in our company, and train ourselves how to pitch, and listen really careful all the questions they are asking, because if they have a question you didn't address that one in your pitch deck, or you can prepare on that same question from the next investor how to answer that one. And then we got in the situation that there was two really interested, like a lead investor on to make the seed round investment to Dispelix. and from those we actually selected Lifeline Ventures. And reasoning, it's really crucial that you select the first investor really well. Well, we decided to go into venture money directly. We didn't do angel rounds because we needed so much money to develop from the get-go. So, but the first investor was really good for us, the Lifeline, and they have been following on all of our rounds. The main points were that those guys, the partners in the Lifeline and the founders, they have been entrepreneurs themselves, starting company from the scratch, building it. So they don't like ask you to non-necessary things on the stage of where your company is. Like, for instance, it doesn't make any sense that you just raised your seed round and you're still developing the technology and everything. You don't need to think about code of conduct. You don't need to think about the employee handbook for the first 30 employees, or everyone knows everyone and everyone can ask you, and everyone is easily handled still when it's a small one. So good to have an investor that understand that one, and the patient investor. So we wanted to have the money from the VCs that are like a evergreen, so that there is not like a 5 years and hey, we need to exit here, and then you focus on the wrong things already.
Okay, so a fund which doesn't need to raise additional capital to be able to put alternative money, future round money in your business. Okay. I mean, I did mention your impressive Series B, so that was earlier this month. So if we jump in time, and now you've raised 28.4 million euros for your Series B, again, quite a sizable chunk of cash. So what will that change for Dispelix on a day-to-day? What will it enable you to do that you couldn't have done without it?
So, of course, anytime you raise, you only raise for the need. So you don't raise money if you don't need that money, and you raise for the need, and then the next phase or something that you deliver. So, of course, for us, it's this upcoming opening of the AR market, and really boost our manufacturing efforts to get that one working, and going really in the millions of volumes on these devices. Also, this is still really R&D heavy, so we need to put more resources on the R&D for the upcoming years also.
Okay. If we go back to the raising process itself, I guess, do you have any kind of do's and don'ts about raising funding? You said that you learned from one pitch to another to investors, but so you could actually tweak your messaging and look for answers that maybe you wouldn't have thought of in the first place. But is there anything else that you particularly would highlight to the audience today?
So you should be able to run the process by yourself. I mean, as a company, the company should be running the process, and it's at the end of the day, it's a similar process as selling your product or your NRE project or something. You check all the possible customers. In this case, you check the investors, and you start going through. You look for the warm introduction. Never try to cold one. Well, sometimes you have to, but it's really hard if you go on a cold to anyone. So the introduction is really important, and try to keep the timeline. So if you say that you are closing on some date, that is the date that you focus on that one. Of course, it will split a couple of months. That's usual how it goes, but you need to get the urgent and the need to investors to move forward, because That's the critical, and try to get the yes or no in a really early stage. Otherwise, you spend huge amount of time and for investors who are saying that, hey, we are looking, or we might be, or we would be interesting on following. So everyone is interested on following once you have the lead investor, because the lead investor validates everything, and then everyone wants to chip in. So only thing that you focus on finding is to someone who will lead the round. Followers you can always find after that. That's like no brainer.
Okay. So keep your timeline, do your homework, and get a yes or a no, but not a maybe.
Yeah, get a yes or no. It's better to go out yes or no than maybe.
Okay. And I guess you raised not only equity, but you had got also some grant funding. So do you want to maybe elaborate a bit more about the dilutive and non-dilutive funding options that one company may have, especially in Europe, because that's what you know most?
Yeah, the venture debt part. So, so of course, the whole funding scheme of the company, you have like you have the grants, you have the loans, and you have the equity part. The grants, of course, try to get all the grants that you can, and that's the power of Europe. We have a lot of grants I think in all of the countries, or EU grants and everything. Try to get those. It's non-dilutive. It's beautiful. You can build a team, build the technology on that one. The second part is that you are not given by the venture debt on the early stage, so you need to raise significantly and have a good contracts that you can attract the venture debt companies, and you need to have a good equity round at the same time. The venture debt is it's nice because it's non-dilutive, so that's the good part. But when you take the venture debt, it comes with the warrants and everything ugly at the same time. So if you cannot pay back that money, they will take your company. That's the basic how it goes. So if you are sure that you can pay back the venture debt part, take the venture debt. It's non-dilutive. If you have any insecurities that can we pay this money back, don't never take it, because they will take your company. That's the basic how it goes.
Okay. I guess this is a good time for me to jump in and say, if anybody's got questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And then the second element is that Photon Hub, which is the reason why we're here also today, and the project which involves this webinar series, also offers a variety of grants. So you can get support for prototyping at TRL 3 and 4. You can get help for upscaling TRL 5 and 6, and for manufacturing TRL 7 and 8. So feel free to apply directly on photonhub.eu. So keep the questions coming. I guess next one for you, Antti, is role. Well, your investors, you said that you had Lifeline Ventures, who was key in the early stages. You also have other investors, which are pretty impressive, like Flashpoint or Atlantic Bridge. So how do you identify investors to pitch to in the first place? And I guess you mentioned it very briefly about the entrepreneur needing to be in the driver's seat. So what do you feel, how much external support do you think one should need or request?
So we have done all rounds without externals help, and I think it's it depends on where you're raising. If you want to have these financial investors, which validates your actually the business case, that's they don't discuss with these advisors or those. It needs to be the CEO or founder to pitch and represent the company and getting the money. If you go on the large rounds with a big portion of strategic or these corporate ventures or private equity, then the advisors are good to have. They have a lot of connections. They can really fast move on that one. So it depends on the stage of the company. I would say that seed A and B you should do yourself, depending on the size of your C and who you are targeting. The advisors could be helpful on that end.
Okay.
But where you get the most help and why the first investor is crucial, because they will intro the next one and they will help you fundraising on the following rounds.
Which is a perfect transition for my next question around the role of your investors. So first, what's the dynamic between your existing investors and the new investors, but also the role of your investors in the journey as you go along? Like, how involved have they been? What kind of advice did you get? And what's the value outside of purely just the money?
Yeah. So let's say, I've mentioned Lifeline many times, but we also had the VTT Ventures from the beginning, and from VTT, it was really good on that. The mechanism was there from VTT that we could also transfer the IP and have the IP rights in the company. So VTT played a lot of role on that, and we are still working a lot on a VTT together. So that's a good to have that combination in your board. If I look our investors, what they bring other than the money, there is a lot of marketing help, a lot of sales help, how that is done, a lot of strategic thinking on what they have seen in the earlier companies. Like, well, most of them have been entrepreneurs themselves, or they're sitting in the 40 or 60 different companies or invested 100 different companies. So when you hit the problems and difficulties, you can ask, and they have previous knowledge that, hey, it could be solved that way or that way. Then of course the help on the negotiations on the bigger deals and these customers, like what is something that you should accept? It's an industry standard to accept that kind of terms. What is something that it's out of the standards that, hey, this is really difficult, and you shouldn't accept these kind of terms. And of course, the thinking, you have to start thinking not only on behalf of yourself, but all the shareholders, and how to increase the shareholder value and how to keep the company still able to exit in some form, in some point of time, not to make an agreement that will hinder that one. And then the corporate, we have a like 3M corporate venture, and why we went on that way is actually that they validate your case in the early stage for the financial investors. Financial investors, they know the numbers, they have a good strategic thinking, but they don't know the technology at all. Like, everyone is, your competitors are pitching to everyone, you are pitching to them, how they could figure out which is the better one. So the corporate guys, they have the expertise in-house. They look really deep on your technology before they invest. So they kind of validate your technology and development for the financial investors. And they could be your customers at the same time, but try to keep the business and the equity part differently. So make a business agreements, but don't tie those on the investment. So that's not my thinking how to go forward.
So taking corporate was going to be one of my questions, but I understand that getting a corporate on your cap table is more of a strategic decision more than anything else. Very good.
And of course, then the latest one is the Atlantic Bridge. They are more on a growth state fund, so they have extensive knowledge on the semiconductor end and the photonic devices. So that was the decision to move forward with them as a leading on the last round.
Okay. And you mentioned something about selecting, in your case, selecting evergreen funds. I guess I'd extend that to the funds to do your research bit, where it's good to know where the fund stands in its life cycle and how much they have money left essentially to deploy. But that goes along the lines of the private equity move. So you decided to have private equity this time round. So do you want to explain that a bit more to our audience?
Well, yeah, it's a private equity. It's a venture capitals. We have VC money, but that's basically we didn't like. You have the like early stage VCs, then you have doing A and B VCs, and then you have the growth stage, and then you have the private equity, like a really big boys at the end.
Deep pockets, yeah.
Deep pockets at the end, and everything relates on what is the expectation of the investor on the return. So, of course, the early ones, they want to have a more X's on the return. And the final, there is the private equity who is thinking like 2x or something small, but you have ongoing business and customers and the revenues, and the risk is smaller for the investment. So we are still on the venture part on our end. Maybe future, some years from now, we are in the private equity part, more or less.
Okay. I guess also in terms of competitive landscape. So, what's the timing for launching a startup, and also how do you see competitors and the way they're doing things? I'm thinking about obviously one of the largest companies in the world, big browser, search browser, renowned company, which had done something with smart glasses as well, or more recently, a company acquired by an American giant. So how does that work for you? Like, what's the dynamic on what you're doing and essentially creating a market? And
yeah, that's a good one. I think there is two things. So first one is the timing of when to found a company, and second one comes to the competitive landscape and how that affects. So the first of all, in a deep tech or hardware, really on a photonics, deep tech, sensors, everything, you have to be really early to move forward. And you try to get the technology the best when the market starts. And that's for our case. Like, we founded the company, there wasn't any markets, and still the market is really niche, and still we are building on the when the market starts. So in some other cases, the market is already there and you can move faster. You have everything ready on the supply chain and those, and you don't need to build those. But I have to say that if we have waited for a couple of years more in a VTT, we would be already too late, because we were in the similar stage as our competing startups. So we raced together on our tech development and everything, and the customerships. Then of course on the markets, a lot of things can happen. So I think it was 2015 when we started raising the first round, and Google just withdraw the glass product, and that wasn't the best time to be pitching about the waveguides for the future smart glasses. Everyone said that, hey, how you gonna do something on Google? Just withdraw on that one. And then the big change happened in the market. So there was the release of the Magic Leap 500 million round from Google, and there was a release of this Microsoft HoloLens product. So that was really crucial for us to get the funding and get everything running, because it shows the investors and everyone that the market is building. Like, okay, Google left the marketplace with their product, but then there is a Microsoft coming, and also this huge startup or huge company from USA, the Magic Leap. So of course it's always that, and it affects a lot. And recently there have been an acquisitions like an Aconia Holographics was a waveguide company, very young company on AR field on waveguides. It was acquired by Apple. I think it was 2018 or something.
Okay.
Then there was the North Focals that was acquired by Google. And then the later one was our dear competitor Wave Optics was acquired by Snap, and that was a really good also for us. You always have to think the whole market on when you are thinking this through. You don't think that, hey, why I wasn't acquired, or even, well, it could be that you didn't want to be acquired. But that acquisition with the 500 million and being a Snap, a new technology company, it really well resonates on the funding sector and also other companies. So other OEMs, it's a sign that people are moving forward, and that's a really good sign every time. If Wave Optics acquisition would have been something non-disclosed amount or something small, it would struggle the whole industry. Like we raised just the 28 million. Digilens, our one competitor, just raised 50 million or something. So it affects the whole industry at the same time. And the latest, the Facebook changing to Meta and the Metaverse, and that one, it will once again boost this market and help us startups on our journey in that end.
Great. I guess the last question before I leave it open to the audience and is what's next for you guys for Dispelix. So I would imagine that you've got a bit of runway and you have a bit of breathing time for the next couple of months before you have to start the funding journey again. I guess it's always nice to talk to investors when you don't need them as well. So is that a conversation that you're keeping going, and how do you see the next 2 years, 3 years?
So being a startup, you are never secured about the funding. So you always have to think about how I secure the funding. Are you applying the EIB venture debt or new grants or something? And you have to remember that if you made an seed round, you talk to investors that invest in a seed round. When you do your A round, you usually talk to investors that make the A round investment, seed an A round. So you need to find investors that invest in an A round, and so forth. Our next one will be a C round, and of course there's different investors working in the C round. And what you need to do is that you need to get them, get there and present your company, even if you are not raising. Just let them know and then update them until the point that you are raising, so you have a pool of investors when you are ready to raise next round.
Excellent. I guess we've got a question from Duva, who mentioned that warm introductions to investors is the way to go, and avoid the cold calling. So what networks have you benefited from, and what networks are good for that? How do you do it, essentially?
Okay, how you do it? Well, I do it really boringly. I did it in Finland and did it with the Finnish investors. So there wasn't too many to go through. We went one trip to USA on a pitching the company, but I think looking back that time, I wasn't ready on that one. You know what the US investors want and what they want to see. It's a total different. And in Europe, you have to be really confident and those things. And we weren't ready for that one. So basically, we used the Finnish network and friends and whoever we could find out to have that he spoke to that guy in 2 years, and then that guy spoke to that, and you find the connection on the company. Nowadays it's easier with the LinkedIn and everything.
Yeah. And I guess you did the proper roadshow in the US. And so what's your position, I guess, if I extend the question to investors in the US versus investors in Europe, or even investors across Asia? Like what do you have any preferences, and what's your position as to raising money outside of Europe?
Yeah, well, of course, it's for us a little bit like, hey, we are coming from this country that no one knows or can put a finger where it is in the map. It's a one challenge being in the USA or in China, or especially in the USA. Secondly, if we look really the markets for the technology and not for the software, the Chinese are really active. If you want to raise on any kind of component technology hardware, it's Chinese investors are really active on that area. And going into fundraising in the USA, you really need to have a really solid pitch. You need to train it. You need to go through it. You need to go through your existing investors, go through the pitch, and listen what they think that there needs to be help. And because at the end, in the investment, you need to get a one guy partner excited in that fund, and then things will roll future. If you cannot make anyone excited in your pitch, you cannot get the funding.
Yeah. I guess one question back to the beginning of our conversation by Alex, saying, thanks, Antti. What kind of know-how in the team is important when you start a company? So do you try and find co-founders who are complementary? Did you have your own expertise and you have others?
So that's a really good question. I can only answer on how it went on our end. So we were like, I came up being a CEO because the guy we were supposed to be CEO left in a last month, and then there was just me, and then the guy said that, hey, Antti, you should be a CEO, and I was like, I don't want to be, but yeah, you need to be. And that was the selection who is the CEO. Then we had a really good, solid knowledge on the software, how to simulate the waveguides, and theoretical on that end, and the software. And so that was our CTO. Then we went through on what we need, and that was the big decisions that, hey, we want to make the prototypes by ourselves. So from the beginning, until we have it in our hand, we need to make that one. So we found one Jussi Rahomäki, our first hire, and hired him to start working on that end. Then we thought about that. Well, we are fabless. We don't build a factory, but we need to have the knowledge how to make these in volumes. and then we find Petri Stenberg to join the company, and yeah, that's pretty much how we build it forward on the knowledge end.
Okay, and I guess you already touched upon about on the next one, but Aaron is asking, how important do you consider technical experience from the founders? Is it essential for the success of the company? And also, a third part to the question is, would hiring an expert early on be a good alternative, I guess, if you're lacking that technical expertise?
Yeah. So, well, my thinking on if you are making a deep tech startup, you should know your shit very well, as to say. So, for a long time, you are the founders are the ones that make all the deals with big companies. They know the technology. They can talk with the tech teams, and everyone respects on the other end the founders if they say something. So my thinking is that you need a really solid technology background if you are going into deep tech, at least. I don't know how it goes into software. That is something I don't know.
Okay. I guess you said that there's no. Is there anything like too much money? Because I think you mentioned it a bit earlier about yeah. Is there anything like too much money?
There is of course too much money. I think you raise money to reach certain goals, and that should be solid. If you raise more money, you need to have a solid thinking on where you use that money to increase the value of the company. And if you don't have, then you shouldn't take that money, because that only dilutes your ownership. Owning on the cap table, it dilutes you, the founders, pretty much. So yeah, and then of course you have to be careful on the valuation of the company, because you don't want to go on a down rounds where your valuation goes lower in the following rounds.
That's a good opportunity to ask you about valuations, actually. So what do you have any specific tips? Like, how did you come up with your first valuations? I know that's the most tricky bit in the very early stages. And how do you approach it now that you're much more mature in the space?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was my co-founder's shoe number minus my shoe number, and that was the valuation. You know, it's really hard to put the valuation on the first one. Of course, you want to have a best one. The only way you can get the valuation up or get the better valuation is to have a competition among the investors.
Okay.
It's like that's the only way. If there is no competition and you are running out of cash, then you take something that is available. So beware, always the fundraising takes more time than you have thought.
That's actually a good takeaway. And I was gonna say before, I guess we've got two more before we wrap up. Is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight since you launched? Like, is there anything that you want to share on a practical standpoint?
That's a tough question, because of course there are tons of things, but doing the things wrong in one way, you learn and do it differently. And you learn. But I would say what is really difficult was, in our case, was that because there wasn't a market yet for our product. So it was really hard to find a guideline on our R&D and development, because if we think about from the beginning, customers were asking like, how big field of view, how big image you can make, can you make a focal planes, can you make a curved waveguides, so forth. And it's really hard to find what is the real thing. and what is just that they are chatting and asking from you, and that's the like really solid vision on your product or what you are doing, even though there is a question of those and those and those things. So try to get the market intelligence as early as possible, because then you can focus your own development better and better.
Aaron actually's got a last question asking if you had an example of a decision that you made where you especially considered the shareholders' interests before anything else. So that may be a bit of a tricky one.
So the points in our journey that the main decision point was the shareholders, thinking about the shareholders' benefit.
Yeah.
Yes. So when you go in each and every negotiations on the contract or project, NRE project or anything, that's the thing where you have to be really careful. All the big guys, they have the manpower, they have 10 lawyers, 20 guys negotiating or something, and they will ask boldly on the terms that if you are not careful, your company becomes unfundable, as to say. So there needs to be extremely careful, and you need to have a good lawyer on your end who have been in that business area and knows the standards and everything. So very good IP lawyer on that end. And that's the point. That's the point where you usually think most on the shareholders' value, because you have to think about that. You are fair to the shareholders, and that you don't make the company so that it's impossible to make an exit. Is it a trade sale or IPO? But you have to think about really careful on those things.
To have an exit strategy.
Yeah.
I guess we're coming to an end. Alex is asking if there's any recommended, if you recommend any resources for successful pitch to investors. I guess before Antti gets on that, we at Photon Hub will be providing some investment readiness closer to Q1 2022 and later in the year as well. So stay tuned. Best way for that, obviously, is to subscribe to the community and get all the updates. But Antti, if I hand over the question to you, is there any resources that you found particularly useful?
So you can find a lot on the beginning, like the 10-slide speech from Kawai, who is the Japanese guy, and the things. But what is good to use is, of course, to have it looking good, especially in the USA. You know that it's not just only on a PowerPoint bullet points, so that there is some graphics on that one. And then try to find some like a funding box or someone to help. They have seen a lot of pitch decks, or some entrepreneur in the area. You can find, hey, there was that guy, he had a company who made blah 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 and things, and then someone bought it, and he's actually living here nearby, only on 1,000 kilometers away. So hey, let's contact him and chat, and you can find a lot of help on those ends.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we've nearly reached the end of the time. So to wrap it up, what's the most meaningful tip you received as an entrepreneur and are happy to pass on today? And that will close our discussion today.
That there is so many on that things that you learn.
I'll give you two if you can't find just one.
but I can say one when you go negotiation, or the points is that never take a no from a person who cannot say yes. Okay.
Never take a no for someone. That sounds very, very philosophical as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a good note to close this on. Let me just share my screen again, just so that people can see the next upcoming webinar. Thank you all for listening in, and hopefully we'll be there for the, well, you'll all be there for the fourth episode beginning of January 2022. Don't forget to join the community, and see you all very soon. Antti, we'll move you to a breakout room in a second. See you all soon.
Thank you.